Hello crafty friends, for today's video I grabbed a wobbly circle stencil. It's got 3 different types or sizes of wobbly circles and I had a big play session with it. I filmed the whole thing and I've cut it down into 3 episodes as it were, so that will be this video and the next 2. But for today's video, I played with this stencil using pigment powders. So I took a piece of mixed media paper, put it on my grip mat, put the stencil on top and then sprinkled over a red violet pigment powder and a teal pigment powder. I then removed the stencil and sprayed water on the paper to hydrate the pigment powders. I then set that aside. The next thing that I did was take another piece of mixed media paper, spray it with water, brush it around so that I got a fairly even distribution, and then I flipped the stencil over because it still had some pigment powder on it, and I pressed this down onto the wet paper, and that gave me a lovely smushy stenciled pattern. I then spritzed the stencil with a bit more water and put that down on another piece of mixed media paper, pressing it down with the microfiber cloth. And then I went back to the first pigment powder panel that I created, gave it another spritz with water to activate as much powder as possible, and then I pressed down a clean piece of mixed media paper on top to kind of get a print. Once I peeled that top piece of paper off, I put the stencil back on the first piece of paper. This is getting very complicated, but I was just basically playing and experimenting and seeing what patterns would emerge from the use of this stencil. So I put the stencil back on top, added a bit more water, brushed it around a bit, and then left it to dry. So out of these backgrounds that I made with the pigment powders, I made 5 cards. I'm going to make one of them for you on camera and I'll share the other 4 at the end of the video. So I took the stencil again because I wanted to dry emboss one of my panels. I taped it down with a bit of washi tape and then I ran it through my die cutting machine with my embossing sandwich. And as well as the circle shapes from the stenciling, I've also got embossed circle shapes. I then popped this in my guillotine and chopped it down into a rectangle, which I then mounted on a piece of white linen textured cardstock. I then cut this down into a rectangle too to give my pigment powder panel a nice white border. I used tape runner again to stick this to my card blank, and I stuck it in the middle because I had an idea. I wanted to turn this into a Christmas card and I wanted to create a Christmas tree shape on top of my background. So I took one of my Christmas sentiment dies and I cut it from gold foil cardstock. Now this is the die that gave me the idea for the Christmas tree shape because the words are arranged in a kind of triangle. So that forms the body of my Christmas tree. I added glue to the back of the die cut using white glue and my dotter. I then stuck the Joy to the World on top of my background and burnished it down with a bit of spare release paper. I then punched a star from some more gold foil cardstock and placed this above the Joy to the World as if it was a star on top of a Christmas tree. And then I cut a small rectangle to act as a trunk and I put this underneath the body of my Christmas tree. I wanted to add a bit of falling snow, so I used white Nouveau drops and cascaded them down the panel. And that was this card done. Really, really simple. Do stick around for a few more minutes because I'll show you the other cards that I made with these backgrounds. So here's the card that we just made. I'm going to have to put this somewhere safe because the Nouveau drops are still wet and I'm bound to stick my finger in them. This one I made with the more subtle background and I ran it through my die cutting machine with this embossing folder. It's got stars on it, sort of 3D stars. So it's got a nice raised pattern in the background. I then die cut out some of these open stars and some sequin stars from gold cardstock and concentrated them around this area, which is a third of the way down from the top, To contrast with the subtle background, I thought I'd go for a bold sentiment. So I've got a big bold congratulations, and I didn't want this black to be the only black because it would look a bit weird. So I put a matte of black around my panel. So now we've got a nice bold lively congratulations card. For this card I wanted to keep it subtle, so I took another one of the backgrounds and ran it through my die cutting machine, and I used this embossing folder, not sure the company, but it was one I got from the Crafty charity shop. I didn't matte it on anything because, as I say, I wanted to keep it subtle and light and airy, but I did cut the panel down before I embossed it with a stitched rectangle die. I put some linen textured cardstock elements on this intersection here of this line and this line, and then I added a lovely pale gold butterfly and a happily ever after. So this might make a nice engagement or wedding card. I did put some Nuvo glitter drops on the circles on the circular element there, and I gave my butterfly body some dimension and gloss with crystal glaze. And this is lovely and shimmery now. We've got the shimmer from the pigment powders and the shimmer from the butterfly. With my last panel, I cut it down using a smaller stitched rectangle die, so I could get 2 cards out of it. For this one, I matted it on black and used a black sentiment, so they tie in nicely together, and then simply added 3 different size butterflies in that pale gold. Again, I gave them crystal glaze on their bodies for a bit of dimension and gloss. Could add a few Nuvo drops or enamel dots or something if you wanted to bring in a bit more energy. And for this last card, I've got another wedding card again, and this is the other half of the panel that I used on the previous card. I mounted it on white because I wanted to keep it light and airy, and I used some leftover silver glitter paper flowers and created a visual triangle. And for the flower centres, I found some pink paper that I felt went well with the colours that were already there. Initially, I put this on a card upside down, so I had to trim that down. So I've got a larger card panel here, which was originally the other card front, and I popped it on another card. So there you go, that's 5 cards from that little pigment powder and stencil session. I hope this video has given you a few ideas. If it has, do let me know in the comments and leave a thumbs up. If you want to see more from me, do subscribe and ring the notification bell. And I'll see you back here in a couple of days for another video. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.